This is probably going to be a pretty long video, so I will not have food at the end of the video. Ciao, I'm Mario, a Swiss car guy on YouTube, and today I'm driving around in my 2008 Lexus LS600H. And today it's going to be another rant video.
Which means he was too lazy to work on a proper video, so he just drives around and rants.
Shut up! Today is not just going to be another rant video. Today I think is going to be my biggest rant video. Because there is one big pet peeve I'm having with, the auto industry, and that's today's topic. And it's a bit of a weird one, but I don't know if it will resonate with you as well. Because I'm a car guy, obviously, but I'm somebody, I like cars. But you know what I don't like? Car companies. I think car companies, they are sort of the worst of them all. They have the worst marketing. They are just geared to make you buy more product, which, makes sense because every company wants that. But I think in my last video, I touched on the fact that if you have a recent car, like something produced in the last even 20 years, it's probably a decent car. And if it's something that's been made within the last 10 years, it's probably a pretty still up-to-date modern car, and you don't really need a new one. So car companies, they know that, they know the cars have become good. So what do? They gear everything towards make you want to buy a new car. I'm personally not the new car buyer, so I think maybe we shouldn't buy that many new cars. But also from an ecological standpoint, because why do we produce millions of cars each year when a large part of them wouldn't have been necessary? But now you might say, well, Mario, every company does that. Consumers need to consume, otherwise the company doesn't grow. And yes, obviously, but look also what it has done to car companies. My favorite example is Mercedes-Benz. Mercedes in the old days were known for their reliability. They were known for making these cars that last forever, that can do 300, 400,000 kilometers. And this is what they were selling cars on. This is what they built a reputation upon. And nowadays, it seems they figured out that it doesn't matter. Because Mercedes, they are hardly that reliable anymore. They produce cars that go bad. They produce cars that will have faults that are really expensive to fix. They produce cars that don't last as well anymore. And obviously it works out for them, because otherwise they wouldn't do this. So yes, having consumers consume seems to be a good business model. But as a used car buyer, of course, I prefer to have these really well-built cars that last forever. But now you might say, Mario, just because they have to make marketing, just because they have to make people want to buy new cars, that doesn't make car companies worse than other companies. In my view, it does. Because we live in a time where marketing has taken over. I don't think car companies are really run by engineers anymore, but they are run by marketing people. And the biggest evidence of that is all the new brands we have today. And it's not because, there are new car companies and of course they also need to have a shot in the market. No, we just have fake new brands that don't do anything except make somebody a brand manager of that brand. Point in case for me, and this is something I don't get, I have a Citroën in front of me. Citroën now has a luxury brand that's called DS. Because why? Why do they need another brand? It's like, okay, then you have a slightly more posh version of a Citroën on the other brand, but you have doubled the cars you produce. That doesn't mean that you're going to sell twice as many cars. And there is a new brand that you have to market, that you have to educate people on it. How does that make any sense? Especially within the Peugeot Citroën group back then, I always reckoned the Citroën was the bit more upmarket brand. While Peugeot was the rugged, the car for the people, the Citroën was a bit more high-end. And I mean, the original DS, it was driven by French President Charles de Gaulle. So if Citroën is good enough for the President of France, why do we need DS right now? And of course, Citroën are not the only ones. I mean, the worst culprit, the very, very worst culprit of them all, or let's call it the elephant in the room, the elephant in the car, or, well, let's say the car is the elephant, Lexus. You know I love the cars. You know I love what Lexus does, what cars they produce. I absolutely hate them as a brand. Because Lexus is a brand without history, it's a brand without heritage, it's a brand that means nothing. The word Lexus means absolutely nothing. It's a brand that was created in a lab, or, you know, let's just call it a marketing department. It's just because Toyota thought, oh my god, people will not buy our luxury cars if they say Toyota on it. And maybe back when Lexus was launched in 1989, that was true, but by now, do people really care about it? No, we had to make up a fake brand in order to compete with BMW, with Mercedes, with Jaguar. All brands that have a long and rich history. So it apparently worked, because I reckon Lexus was very successful in America. They never were really... Weird. PCS not available. Oh my god, I'm ranting about Lexus and now the car starts throwing faults at me. No, Lexus is a great brand. It's awesome. They have it spot on. It's exactly the way it should be. Might have to do a quick cycle. Oh. Have you tried rebooting it? Yes, apparently it works. But yes, the Lexus experiment has obviously worked, because I think they were quite popular in America. Not really that popular in Europe. They did sell quite a few hybrid SUVs. The first RX 400s, I think, and the 450s, they were relatively popular, especially here in Zurich. But all in all, as a car brand, Lexus never really got the foothold in Europe that it has in America. But to American buyers, the whole Lexus thing seems to have worked really well, because I remember an episode when I was in America. I was during a student project. I think it was in 2008, so a few years back, and I was talking with one of my colleagues, one of the local students, about how many Lexuses there were on campus and in general in the Boston area. And then I deducted that, Americans, they seem to be more open to Japanese cars than, for example, the Europeans. But then he said, no. People believe that Lexus is an American brand. And by that statement, I mean, it obviously worked. And thinking about it, Lexus probably is an American brand, because it was a brand created to conquer the American luxury market, which they did very well for a period of time. I don't know if they're still doing so well, but back then they certainly reached their mission objective. And I mean, Lexus is not the only one. There's also Acura and Infiniti. Acura was never sold in Europe, and Infiniti just retreated from Europe, because the Europeans didn't really care. But also I think, why does Nissan need Infiniti? It's not like Nissan is that car maker that's doing so super well and let's do a sub-brand that's even better. No. Nissan should first straighten out their own lineup and fix what's wrong, and not try to sell posh versions of their cars as a different brand. And people know it's a Nissan, so why not call it Nissan? Especially the G37s. Instead of selling those cars under the stupid Infiniti brand, just sell them under the same name you sell them in Japan, and maybe some enthusiasts will appreciate it. Because these cars are sold in Japan as the Nissan Skyline. Yes, this is a good brand with heritage, the Skyline. But no, we have to make it an infinity and a number and some letters. And this is another thing that annoys me about car brands. It seems that cars are nowadays basically mostly marketed towards, Joe everybody and not towards enthusiasts. It sounds weird because there are a lot of enthusiast models out there, but the marketing is geared to the everyday person, which of course you have a broader base than if you just go after car enthusiasts. But if I think about what is the most successful, or let's say the most recognizable and famous car brand in the world, and ask myself, do they market to enthusiasts or do they market to the general public? I reckon the most recognizable car brand in the world, and probably the most desirable, is Ferrari. A brand that historically only markets to enthusiasts, even though they're starting to water it down with more and more models. But Ferrari is pretty much an enthusiast car. It's not a car my mom would ever buy, even if she was a millionaire. So maybe marketing to enthusiasts wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I mean, I remember a long time ago, there was this Italian car brand. It was called Lancia. It sold basically sort of understated Grand Touras, like a bit posher, but still mid to upmarket cars. They had a little market, but they were still a bit of a fledgling brand. They were never doing that well until they started racing, and they were very successful in racing. I mean, it started with the Aurelias, the B20s, but soon the rally team realized that, well, it would be good to have a smaller car to be more agile and nimble. And at that time, Lancia had the Fulvia in its range, the coupe, which, by the words of Lancia's racing team director Cesare Fiorio, was a bit of a ladies' car, but it was a good base to build a rally car on. They made a successful rally car out of it, and as a result, sales of that car went to the top. And the car remained in production for like another 6 or 7 years when it was actually slated for replacement, which shows that marketing to enthusiasts, building race cars, building really nice sports cars can really help a brand, can help sell cars. You just don't have to market everything on being able to have Android Auto and CarPlay. Get the enthusiasts, and the enthusiasm will trickle down to the general public. Of course, like most things, also racing success can be a two-edged sword. In the example of Lancia, it was when the Group B rally cars were forbidden and they had to make a new rally car. They went to the compact car Lancia had in production back then, which was the Lancia Delta, a car that had been in production since 1979. And they developed a rally car for 1987 based on it, the Lancia Delta 4WD. A car that dominated, and in its later iterations as the Delta Integrale would dominate for years. So what happened was that with the Delta winning all these rallies and the World Constructors' Championships, sales of the regular Delta skyrocketed again on a car that was basically due for a replacement, on a car where all the tooling and everything was basically paid off. So every car they sold was like free money, and they kept doing that. Even though the replacement for the Delta 2, was ready for production in 1987. It would have come out for the 1988 model year. But since the old Delta was selling so well due to the rally successes and everything, they kept the old model in production. And the Delta 2 didn't come out until, I believe, 1993. And by that time, that was like a 6-7-year-old car that was launched. So the car was not competitive, and Lancia had stopped competing in the rallies, and this was the end for Lancia. After Fiat acquired Alfa Romeo, they basically gave up on Lancia, which was a wrong move. But then again, I think Fiat Chrysler or Stellantis or whatever the hell they are called now, they're not very good at managing brands. Because first they killed Lancia, which is actually unforgivable. They're propping up Alfa Romeo to be something that it isn't. because Alfa Romeo, I don't know if that company has ever been profitable in its history. Yeah, but Stellantis, they are also very bad at this, because I already mentioned the S as a brand that the world doesn't need, but then there is also Abarth. And I know, oh, but Abarth is cool and everything. Yes, but why does it need to be a brand? Couldn't it just have been, a designation, a label on a car? Like Mercedes does it right. They do a lot of AMGs, too many in my opinion, but they are still Mercedes-Benz. They're not AMG brand cars, because Mercedes knows how important it is to keep a strong main brand. This is why they're also not afraid to put their brands on vans and on trucks and on economy cars and on everything they produce, because hey, that's what a brand is for. You don't need a brand for every niche and every model you make. So I like that there is an Abarth today, but to me it wouldn't have to be a brand. It could just be models. We produce Abarth models because everybody knows that they are Fiats. They look exactly the same, and yes, they have more power and better handling, but they are Fiats. So why not just go with what people know? I cannot talk of Stellantis without talking about Chrysler. When the big three in America were going bust, which was I think in 2006, 2007, around then, when the big bailout happened, the big Detroit car manufacturers did something that in my opinion was right. They reduced the number of brands. So they cut down on the brands, they cut down on the badge engineering, and this is why General Motors, they closed Pontiac, the brand that under John DeLorean invented the muscle car, the brand that gave us Knight Rider. They closed Pontiac, they closed Oldsmobile. Chrysler even closed Plymouth, Ford closed Mercury. So it was the right development. They were trimming down the unnecessary brands. But then, what did Fiat Chrysler back then do? They looked at Dodge's product lineup and said, let's take 60% of it out and put them in their own brand, and they made Ram a brand. And now you have Ram and you have Dodge. But as far as I can see, Dodge produces like two models, the Charger and the Challenger. I mean, I'm not American. You people from America, you will know if they produce more than those two cars, but those are the ones that I see. So therefore now we have a brand that produces trucks and vans and stuff like that. And then you have another brand that produces two cars that have been around since the Stone Ages, basically. So, I mean, I can see that in the near future, Stellantis will say, well, why do we even have Dodge anymore? Yeah, because you took most of it out into a different brand. So we have so many brands for no reason. And now you might say, well, Mario, but really, what's the difference if it's a different brand or if it's just a sub-brand within a brand? I personally don't like it, and also I think it's also a cost issue, because keeping additional brands must cost the manufacturers money. Even if it's just to have, a brand manager for every brand, and usually these people don't tend to do the work all by themselves, so they will have staff and a team under them, and they will also have to spend money on marketing those brands, because it's not like, I am a well-established car brand, so I can focus on actually marketing a model. No, I also have to spend money in marketing my brand and getting my brand known. Otherwise, people will just look at it and say, who's that? Is that a Chinese or what? So for car manufacturers, I think this is a dead end. Stop it with those brands, reduce them, go back to your core brand or whatever you do. Get rid of all those stupid brands. And yes, I know there will be some marketing people who will lose their job, but man, do we really need that many marketing people? I mean, I said how Lexus is probably the worst offender as for, artificial fake brands, but if I think about it, there is one brand that is even worse, and that is Cupra. Cupra is the sporty brand by Seat. Seat, which in itself is already a crappy freaking brand. They were usually just a contractor to build Fiats in Spain. This is why old Seats are usually always some variation of an old Fiat. And even though after VW acquired Seat, they try to make them into something. They try to make them like the sporty Southern European brand. I think it didn't really work that well. They also tried to make them like the cheaper Volkswagen, which then they started doing with Skoda as well, and Skoda was wildly successful, and then Seat kind of wasn't. And as far as I'm aware, Seat is also one of those long-time unprofitable brands. So why the hell would you make a sporty sub-brand, an additional brand for a brand that's already struggling? This is absolutely mind-blowing to me. Why do we need a Cupra brand? It doesn't make sense. So I don't know what's wrong with car companies, but I know one thing. I know we have not only too many brands, we have too many car companies. Because we see it now. In my last video, where I always sound like a car boomer, like everything was better in the old days, but we clearly see it with young people. Young people nowadays, they are not that interested in cars anymore. And the likeliness of them really have cars in the future, I think, is not that high. So however it's going in the future, probably fewer cars will be sold than today. That said, we have still emerging markets that are growing. But if I speak about like Western world, Western Europe, even America, I think the car market is going to shrink and not increase. Because even though if in America, especially right now with the chip shortage, car prices are going up and demand is very high, the American market is a very much doped one. I recently read an article that a large percentage of American auto loans are subprime. I mean, they do subprime loans on cars. Have they learned nothing from the last financial crisis? And this is also another bubble that will burst. Also, I read this on Jalopnik, I believe, that auto loans nowadays in America have gotten incredibly long. So they run for like 72 months or something like that. So you have a car loan for 6 years or for 7 years, or maybe even more, maybe 84 months or something like that. I think that if you have to make payments for like 8 years to buy a car, then maybe you shouldn't buy that car. Maybe you should buy something a bit cheaper that you can actually afford. So I think the demand for cars will go down in the future, and already now it's artificially propped up. So I think we need fewer car manufacturers. All the manufacturers need to become smaller in order to adjust to the demand. And this is another thing why I am so amazed of all the startups now in the EV field, all these new car companies that want to get into making cars, like Neo, Lordstown Motors, Rivian, Lucid Air, whatever. I mean, sure, they've seen Tesla being relatively successful, but to me it's absolutely amazing because the space is getting more and more crowded with demand going down long term. And at the same time, I seem to remember that the car industry is traditionally not the greatest industry to be in, because you have huge expenses and the returns for that, they are not that high. So you have a lot of expenses, you have a lot of risk. Why would you want to be a car company? I mean, sure, I'm a car guy. I can get the appeal of producing my own car, but other than ego, don't get into car manufacturing. It's a nightmare. So this is why I don't really like car manufacturers. I still love the cars, but man, the companies behind them, I just don't get it. Do you get it? Is there a car manufacturer that you think, no, they are different, we really like them? And I'm not talking about Morgan or somebody who produces like 3 cars a year. Please comment. And yes, if you enjoyed this rant, give it a like, consider subscribing for more rants. And anyway, this is it. I'm done for this video. Thank you so much for watching and have a nice day. Oh man, it's a tunnel.